The old man leaned forward, his fingers tightening on the chair as though holding onto it was the only thing keeping him anchored to the present. His voice grew heavier, more burdened, as he continued. You must understand, this spirit was not of the kind you chase away with incense or holy words alone. It was older than us, older than the trees, older than the stones beneath our feet. It had been waiting for generations, and when it awakened, it did not come to frighten us. It came to claim us. The room seemed to grow colder as he spoke. It began with the dreams, then the shadows, then the whispers. But after the shepherd boy vanished, it wanted more. It wanted families, whole families, the family that disappeared from their home. They were the first, but they were not the last. Week after week, house after house, people vanished. Sometimes in silence, sometimes in terror, but always without a trace. The land swallowed them, and the land grew hungrier. He stopped, and for a long moment the only sound was the lantern hissing. Then, in a voice filled with sorrow, he whispered, "The elders knew the truth, though they kept it from us until it was too late." The old man raised his eyes, and their darkness deepened. Centuries ago, a betrayal was committed here. A man of faith, a saint, had walked this land. He had been trusted, respected, and loved. But his own kin turned against him. They deceived him, killed him, and buried his body in secret, without prayer, without honor, without justice. The earth drank his blood, and his soul, bound by rage, never left. It lingered, waiting. And when the time was right, it rose again. Not as the man it had once been, but as something else. Something that fed on fear, something that could never be satisfied. He sighed, and the sound was like the weight of centuries. Some fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Others cursed the dead, blaming them for the curse that now haunted the living. But none of it mattered. The spirit did not care for our sorrow, nor our prayers. It wanted only one thing: to remind us that the sins of the past can never be buried. He paused, and his hand shook as he lifted it to his face, wiping at unseen sweat. One by one, families began to flee. They packed what little they could carry, they carried their children on their backs, and they ran into the night. But the spirit followed them. Some never made it to the next town. They were found on the roads, their bodies pale and empty, as though their souls had been pulled out and left hollow. Others reached new villages, but the whispers returned within days. They could not escape. The curse was not bound to the land anymore. It was bound to them. His voice grew sharper. That was when we realized the truth. The spirit was not outside us. It was inside us. It was in our blood. Passed down from those who had committed the betrayal. Passed down to every child born in that soil. We could not run. We could not hide. We carried it wherever we went. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, his lips moved silently, as though he was praying. Then, slowly, he opened them again. I remained when others fled. I stayed to see what would become of the village, and I wished to God that I had not. For what I saw cannot be forgotten. His voice lowered, and the shadows in the room seemed to deepen. The spirit grew stronger as the village emptied. It no longer waited at the tree line. It walked the streets at night. I saw it myself. A figure of smoke, taller than any man, its eyes burning like coals, its steps leaving no sound. It passed by my house, and as it did, the air grew so heavy I could not breathe. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur. I thought I was dying, but then it moved on. It spared me, not out of mercy, but because it wanted me to see what was coming. The old man's hands shook violently, but he did not stop. One night, I heard the sound of drums. Drums that no one was playing. They echoed through the village, deep and hollow, like the heartbeat of the earth itself, and with them came voices. Not human voices, but something else. They filled the air, chanting, weeping, laughing. I ran to the mosque, thinking to find safety. But when I entered, the walls were dripping with black liquid, thick and foul, and the air was filled with the sound of screams that came from nowhere. I fell to the ground, covering my ears, but the sound was inside me, inside my head, inside my blood. The old man's eyes were wet now. When I crawled back out into the street, I saw them. The missing, the families, the shepherd boy, the imam, all of them standing in silence. Their eyes empty, their faces pale, their mouths moving silently in unison. They were not alive, they were not dead. They were something in between, and behind them it stood, taller than ever, its smoke rising into the sky, its eyes fixed on me. It did not speak, it did not need to. I knew then that it had claimed them. They were its now, forever. He leaned back, his voice falling into a whisper. And that is why I am here. That is why I sit in this room, speaking to you now, because I am the last of my people, the last witness to what happened. And when I am gone, so too will be the memory. But the spirit will not be gone. It will live on, in the blood, in the land, in the silence that comes when even the wind dares not move. The lantern flickered, dimming lower, the flame struggling as though the air itself had grown thin. The old man closed his eyes, and for a moment he seemed to vanish into the shadows. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost lost to the dark, he whispered, "It is still here, even now, listening." The room fell into silence. And in that silence, a faint whisper brushed past the ear, a whisper that carried your name. The old man's voice lowered, his words carrying the weight of a century. His eyes flickered toward the lantern, as though he feared what the shadows might do if the flame went out. He leaned closer, and his breath trembled. You think curses live in stories. You think they belong to old books, to superstitions, to the mouths of frightened children. But I tell you now, they live, they breathe, they follow, and once they choose you, there is no escape. His hand moved slowly across the table, tracing invisible shapes, perhaps verses, perhaps prayers. When the first families fled, I thought they would find peace in other lands. I thought distance would break the chain. But weeks later, a man returned. His beard was long, his eyes hollow, his voice shaking. He said, "It followed us. It entered our new home." At night, my daughter speaks with the voice of my dead father. My wife wakes with bruises on her arms, though no hand has touched her. My sons walk in their sleep, gathering stones to build graves for people who are not dead. We cannot run, we cannot escape. Then he left again, and I never saw him after that. The old man paused, and the silence stretched until it felt unbearable. It grew bolder, he said at last. What once lingered in dreams now stood in daylight. In the middle of the market, a shadow crossed the ground, though the sun was clear in the sky. Women screamed, but when we turned, no one was there. At the well, voices whispered from the water. Men dropped their buckets and fled, their faces pale, their lips trembling. The water was no longer water. It was black, thick, like the earth's blood. He took a deep breath and looked toward the door, as if half expecting it to creak open. The Imam gathered us again. His voice shook as he told us the truth. He said this was no simple jinn, no restless soul, no trick of darkness. He told us it was vengeance. The vengeance of the betrayed, the murdered, the dishonored. He said their cries had risen from the soil, and now they walked among us. And we children of the betrayers were their punishment. The lantern hissed, the flame bending low. Some men armed themselves. The old man continued. They said they would fight it, as if it were flesh and bone. They took axes, knives, even fire. That night, they went into the forest. We heard their cries. We heard the trees breaking, the ground shaking. We heard laughter that did not belong to men. Then silence. When morning came, we found only their weapons, buried in the earth as though the land itself had swallowed them whole. Not one man returned. His hands trembled now. He gripped the chair as though the memory itself was dragging him down. The children suffered most. Their dreams were filled with screams. They would sit up at night, their eyes open, their mouths moving with words not their own. Some spoke languages no one understood. Some drew shapes in the dirt circles, lines, marks that burned our eyes when we looked too long. And some stopped breathing in their sleep. We buried them quickly, but even then, the soil did not keep still. The graves trembled, as though something beneath was moving. The old man lowered his head, his beard brushing against his chest. We asked the elders why this was happening, and that was when they told us the story that had been hidden for generations. The story of the saint who had walked this land, betrayed and killed by his own kin. His blood was spilled, his body buried without prayer, his spirit denied peace. The betrayal was never confessed, never repented. And so it remained, festering, turning to poison, until it grew into this. His voice grew heavy with sorrow. The curse was not only on the land, it was in us, in our veins. In every child born here, we carried it with us, even if we fled. That is why the spirit followed, why the whispers traveled, why the dreams spread beyond the village. We were marked forever. The lantern dimmed further, its light barely keeping back the shadows. The old man's eyes shone with unshed tears. One by one, the houses emptied. Some families ran, some vanished, some gave themselves willingly, believing that surrender would end the torment. But the spirit does not end. It does not forgive. It only takes until nothing remains but silence. He lifted his head and looked into the darkness beyond the lantern glow. His voice dropped to a whisper. I stayed when the last family left. I stayed because I wanted to know the end. Fool that I was. Because the end was not an end. It was only the beginning of something worse. He paused, and for a moment the room seemed to breathe with him. The shadows thickened. The silence grew heavier. His voice came again, softer, like a secret spoken too late. At night, I walked through the empty streets. The doors swung open and closed without wind. The windows stared like eyes. The air stank of smoke, though no fire burned. And then, I heard it. The sound of drums. Drums that no hands played. Slow, deep, like the heartbeat of something buried beneath the ground. They echoed through the village, calling, and when I followed them, I saw what no man should see. His hand trembled against the table. They were there. The missing, the shepherd boy, the families, the imam, all of them, standing in silence. Their eyes empty, their faces pale, their mouths moving in unison, whispering words I could not understand. They were not alive. They were not dead. They were something else, something caught, something trapped. The old man's voice cracked, and he pressed his hand to his chest. And behind them, it stood, taller than any tree, a figure of smoke and fire. Its eyes burned through me. It raised no hand, spoke no word, yet I felt its will. It had claimed them, all of them, and I knew it would claim me too. It is only waiting. Waiting until my voice fails, until my breath ends, and then it will take me as well. He fell silent. The lantern flickered once more, and in that silence the air shifted. A whisper brushed past, faint and chilling. It carried no words, only the sound of something that knew your name. The old man sat in silence for so long that I thought he might have drifted into sleep. But then, with a slow, shaking breath, he lifted his head again. His eyes had changed. They were no longer simply tired. They were haunted, as though he had just remembered something he wished he could forget. "You listen to me now," he whispered, his voice raw, "because what I am telling you is not only the story of this village, it is a warning to you." His finger trembled as he pointed not to the past, not to the shadows, but directly at me. "You have listened too long. You have given it your attention. That is how it begins. That is how it spreads. Do you understand? By listening, by knowing, by imagining, it is not bound to this soil anymore. It travels through memory, through words, through stories. And now, it knows you." The room seemed colder. I tried to steady my breath, but the air felt thin, as if the story itself had drained the oxygen. "I told myself once," the old man continued, his voice breaking, "that the curse was bound to this land. But I was wrong. I saw travelers come through, strangers who stayed a single night. They left in the morning pale, trembling, and later I heard of their deaths. Their faces marked by terror, their mouths frozen open. They had carried it away, just as you are carrying it now." He leaned closer. The lantern light cut across his face, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something moving beneath his skin. "You think you are safe, because the door is locked, because the night is outside, because you tell yourself it is only a story. But I tell you now, the story is the door. Every word you hear, every picture you form in your mind, it opens the way a little wider." The silence pressed in again. I wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but my tongue felt heavy, as if bound by the same weight that had held me down in my nightmares. His voice dropped even lower, almost a rasp. "Do you hear it yet? The sound between the silence. The breath that does not belong to either of us. That is how you know it has entered. First the sound, then the shadow. And then, when you close your eyes tonight, it will stand beside your bed." The lantern sputtered. The flame thinned, bending against some invisible wind. Shadows stretched along the walls, long and crooked. The old man closed his eyes. His lips moved, but I could not hear the words. A prayer, maybe, or a curse. His voice grew faster, trembling, until he suddenly snapped his head toward the far corner of the room. "Do not look," he hissed. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "If you look, it will know you see it. And if it knows you see it, it will never leave." The corner of the room seemed darker than before, darker than the night itself. I wanted to look. I wanted to turn my head. But his grip tightened, nails digging into my skin, You feel it, don't you? He whispered. That weight pressing against your chest, even though you are awake. That shiver running through your bones. That is it. That is its first touch. Once it touches, it never forgets. His words blurred into a low chant. The lantern flickered again, smaller, weaker, until the room was almost swallowed by shadow. The air felt heavy, wet, like breathing through cloth. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would echo off the walls. Then the old man stopped chanting. His eyes widened, his face twisted in fear, and slowly his gaze rose above my shoulder. I froze. The silence roared in my ears. Every part of me screamed to turn, to see what was behind me. But I couldn't. My body was locked in that same horrible paralysis I had once known. My breath came shallow, my skin crawled. The old man whispered one final word, his voice so faint I almost didn't hear it. Run. And then the lantern went out. Darkness swallowed everything. 4:51 p.m. 10 Januari tahun 2025, Usman and Jum. The nights that followed were worse than the first. Sleep became a war one could not win. Every time I shut my eyes, I felt him waiting. The darkness in the corners of my room grew heavier, as though the walls themselves were breathing. And always, always, the weight of his stare pressing down on me. I tried to resist. I left lights on, the television running, even soft music playing through the night. None of it mattered, because he didn't come from outside. He wasn't breaking into my home. He was already here. He was in the air I breathed, the silence between my thoughts, the shadows stitched into the seams of my room. One night, I dared to speak. My throat was dry, my voice trembling. I whispered into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The silence that followed was colder than his presence. For a moment, I thought he might be gone. But then, from the far corner of the room, I heard it. A breath, not mine, deep, drawn out, deliberate. And then he moved. For the first time, the Hat Man did not stay still. I saw the wide brim tilt forward, his shoulders shifting as he stepped closer. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My entire body betrayed me. The shadows around him seemed to stretch, spilling out across the floor, crawling toward my bed like liquid night. It wasn't just darkness anymore. It had weight. It had intention. I tried to pray, the words barely forming on my lips. For a brief moment, I felt strength, the tiniest spark of resistance. But then it was gone, and in its place, a sound not from him, from behind him, whispering voices. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Too soft to understand, but loud enough to shake me inside. It was as though the Hat Man was not alone, but a vessel. Something larger was watching through him. The shadow touched the edge of my bed. The air grew so cold I could see my own breath. My chest tightened until I thought my ribs might snap. And then, just as his figure leaned closer, he stopped. The whispers ceased. The room went silent. His figure retreated, dissolving into the far corner until only the outline of his hat remained. And then, nothing. Just the sound of my pounding heartbeat. The next morning, I woke to find scratches along the wall near my bed. Long, uneven marks, as though something had clawed its way back into the shadows. That was the last night he came close. But I know he isn't gone. Sometimes, when I wake in the early hours, I feel the same pressure in the room. I don't have to open my eyes to know he's there, watching, waiting. And I wonder, Each time I feel him near, how long before he decides to step forward again? Some say the Hat Man feeds on fear, others claim he is a warning, a messenger of death. I don't know which is worse. All I know is that once you see him, truly see him, you are never alone again. Because the Hat Man never leaves. He only waits. 4:52 p.m. 10 Januari tahun 2025. Usman Anjum, the nights after his visit changed me. Sleep was no longer rest. It was a battlefield, and I was losing every single time. I stopped telling myself it was a dream. Dreams don't follow you into the waking world. Dreams don't leave marks on your walls. Dreams don't breathe in your ear. I tried everything to keep him away. I left every light in the house burning. I played recordings of human voices, hoping to trick myself into feeling less alone. I even dragged my mattress into the living room, thinking maybe the bedroom itself was cursed. But no matter where I went, no matter how bright the room, he always found me. The strange thing is, he never appeared during the day. The sunlight was my only comfort. It made me believe that maybe, just maybe, he belonged to the night alone. But deep down I knew the truth. He wasn't limited by time. He was patient. He was choosing when to show himself. He wanted me to anticipate him, to dread him. One night, I woke at exactly 3:12 a.m. The clock glowed red in the dark, and I felt it before I saw him. That heavy air, that suffocating weight pressing on my chest. My breath came shallow, my arms locked by my sides. I didn't need to open my eyes to know he was there, but I did. Against every instinct in me, I looked. He was closer than ever before. Not in the corner this time, not at the doorway. He was standing at the foot of my bed, the wide brim of his hat casting a perfect black shadow over his face. He had no features, but I knew he was smiling. The shadows around him pulsed, alive, like smoke crawling across the floor. And then I heard it again, the whispers. Dozens of voices, layered on top of each other, too many to count. They weren't speaking in a language I understood, but the sound carried a weight that made my skin crawl. It felt like judgment. Like a verdict being read in a courtroom I never knew I had been dragged into. The whispers grew louder, sharper, until they seemed to fill my head, pounding against my skull. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My body wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to him. Then the strangest thing happened. For a brief second, I thought I saw something in him. Behind the figure, like a flicker. A glimpse of something vast, something not human. It was as if the Hat Man was just a mask, a doorway, a vessel for something older and darker than anything I could imagine. I shut my eyes, forcing every ounce of strength I had left into a prayer. I whispered words I hadn't spoken since childhood, words that once brought comfort. For a moment, the whispers quieted. For a moment, I felt warmth return to my chest. But then, laughter, not human laughter. A sound low and broken, as if mocking me for believing prayer could protect me. My heart raced, my body trembled, and I knew E was nothing to him, nothing but prey. And then, just like that, he stepped back. The whispers stopped, the air cleared. He dissolved into the corner, leaving nothing but silence. It was over, for that night. Morning came. The first rays of sunlight poured through my curtains, and I sat up in bed, drenched in sweat, trembling. My walls bore new scratches, deeper than the last. 3 long marks running downward. Not random this time, intentional, like a signature. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't answer calls. I just sat in silence, staring at those marks, trying to convince myself there was some explanation. But there isn't, there can't be. And here's the truth that chills me the most. It's not just me. I've spoken with others who have seen him, read countless stories online, each one eerily similar. The same wide-brimmed hat, the same faceless stare, the same suffocating presence. Some believe he is a demon. Some call him a traveler from another dimension. Some say he is a harbinger of death, arriving to warn or collect. But I believe something worse. I believe he's a hunter. And once you've seen him, once you've locked eyes with that abyss beneath the hat, you are marked. You belong to him. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, he will take what he came for. I live with that knowledge every day now. Every night, when the house grows still, I feel him. Not always visible, not always close, but always there, waiting, watching. Sometimes, when I wake in the small hours, I keep my eyes shut tight. I don't dare look, because I know the moment I do, I'll see him again. And each time, he'll be closer. The Hat Man never leaves. He never forgives. And one night, when I am too weak, too tired, or too afraid to fight, he will not just stand in the corner, or at the foot of my bed. He will sit beside me, and I will not wake again. Until then, I wait, just like he does, because the Hat Man is patient, and patience is eternal.